Welcome to Globewise Entertainment. Today, we're diving into the dark side of Hollywood's battlefields with the most hated war movies of all time. From epic flops to cringeworthy historical inaccuracies, these films promised glory but delivered disappointment. If you haven't subscribed to Globewise Entertainment yet, hit that subscribe button now and join our community of movie lovers. And don't forget to tell us in the comment box, which war movie made you roll your eyes the most? Get ready, the battlefield of bad cinema starts now. 10. The Green Berets, 1968. The war movie that Hollywood wants you to forget. When the Green Berets marched into theaters in 1968, audiences expected a gritty, realistic look at the Vietnam War. After all, the country was already drowning in protests, politics, and nightly news footage showing the brutal reality overseas. But what they got was something entirely different. John Wayne, one of Hollywood's biggest legends, wanted to create a film that showed American heroism and patriotism during a time of rising anti-war sentiment. But instead of inspiring the nation, the film ignited a firestorm of outrage. From its very first frames, the Green Berets was accused of being propaganda, oversimplified, and shockingly inaccurate. Critics slammed it for portraying the Vietnam conflict like a classic Western, good guys in white hats, bad guys in black, while ignoring the political complexity that defined the era. Major newspapers shredded the movie. Roger Ebert famously gave it 0 stars, calling it a heavy-handed fantasy with almost no relation to the truth. And audiences weren't much kinder. Many walked out of theaters, angered by how the film glorified a war that was taking thousands of young American lives. But perhaps the most hated moment of all? The stunningly unrealistic ending, the sun setting in the east, which became a symbol of just how careless the production felt to its critics. Yet for all the controversy, the film became a strange cultural relic, a time capsule of Hollywood's attempt to shape public opinion during one of America's darkest chapters. Whether you love it or despise it, there's no denying one thing. The Green Berets remains one of the most polarizing and hated war movies ever made. Because sometimes, a movie isn't remembered for how well it's made, but for how loudly the world rejected it. 9. Incheon, 1981. The $46 million disaster nobody asked for. Our countdown takes a sharp nosedive into one of the biggest box office catastrophes in Hollywood history, Incheon, 1981. A film so infamous, so widely rejected, that it often feels like a legend whispered about rather than a movie anyone has actually watched. The production started with massive ambition, a war epic meant to showcase the dramatic Battle of Incheon during the Korean War. But behind the scenes lurked a story far stranger, and far more entertaining, than anything that ever made it to screen. Funded almost entirely by the Unification Church, backed by controversial religious leader Sun Myung-moon, Incheon was already raising eyebrows before the cameras even rolled. The project ballooned into a chaotic mess of rewrites, reshoots, and vanishing direction. Even legendary actor Laurence Olivier, cast as General Douglas MacArthur, later admitted he only did the film for the paycheck. Despite costing a staggering $46 million, over $150 million today, the movie was plagued with hurricane damage, rushed editing, and baffling creative choices. When it finally premiered, critics were brutal. Reviewers called it lifeless, confused, and dramatically flat, while audiences simply stayed away. Incheon made back just $5 million, instantly earning its place as one of cinema's most expensive failures. To this day, the movie's reputation survives mostly through stories, not viewings. It was pulled from distribution, rarely screened, and nearly vanished completely. In a way, the myth of Incheon has become more famous than the film itself. And that's why it ranks on our list, not just as a hated war movie, but as a cautionary tale of what happens when massive budgets, muddled vision, and behind-the-scenes chaos collide. 8. Gods and Generals, 2003. The Civil War epic audiences rejected. When Gods and Generals marched into theaters in 2003, Hollywood expected a sweeping Civil War epic, but what audiences got instead felt more like a never-ending battlefield of boredom. At nearly 4 hours long, the film tried to be a spiritual prequel to the beloved Gettysburg, yet somehow ended up being one of the most polarizing war movies ever made. The film set out to honor American history with grand visuals, detailed uniforms, and a massive cast. But instead of gripping war drama, viewers complained they were stuck in a slow, wandering lecture that forgot one crucial thing: storytelling. Scenes dragged on with endless speeches, stiff dialogue, and pacing so sluggish that many joked the Civil War ended faster than this movie. But the real controversy? The film's portrayal of Confederate generals, especially Stonewall Jackson, was framed with such reverence that critics accused it of romanticizing the Confederacy. What was meant to be a historical epic was criticized as one-sided, outdated, and politically tone-deaf, especially for a 2003 audience expecting nuance, not nostalgia. Despite its $56 million budget and battlefield reenactments featuring thousands of extras, the movie collapsed at the box office. Viewers walked in expecting emotional intensity and moral complexity, but walked out feeling like they had just sat through a very expensive, very long history class. To this day, Gods and Generals is remembered not for its ambition, but for its reputation as one of the most painfully slow and widely disliked war films ever released, a cinematic misfire where noble intentions met disastrous execution. 7. Che. 1969. The biopic that sparked outrage before it even hit theaters. When Che blasted onto screens in 1969, it arrived with the confidence of a grand Hollywood epic, big studio backing, well-known actors, and the promise of telling the definitive story of one of the most controversial figures of the 20th century. But instead of making history, it became one of the most hated war movies ever made. From the very beginning, the film faced an impossible mission. Che Guevara was a global flashpoint, seen by some as a hero and by others as a threat. But the movie didn't lean into either perspective. Instead, it tried to stay neutral and ended up pleasing no one. Audiences expecting a bold political statement were confused. Critics searching for emotional depth were disappointed. And viewers hoping for an action-packed war epic were stunned by how flat and disconnected it felt. Even Che's supporters criticized the film for oversimplifying his life, while his opponents slammed it for portraying him too sympathetically. In just a few weeks, Che went from major release to box office catastrophe. But the biggest backlash came from the performance itself. Omar Sharif, a beloved Hollywood star, stepped into the role of Che, only to spark furious reactions. Many claimed he didn't resemble the real man, others said he looked uncomfortable in the part, and some felt the entire casting decision was a cynical attempt to sell tickets rather than tell a meaningful story. Behind the scenes, even the filmmakers seemed unsure of what they wanted the movie to be. A war drama? A political biography? A historical reconstruction? The result was a project that felt caught between genres, unable to commit to any direction. And once word spread about how unfocused the film was, audiences stayed far away. Today is remembered not for its ambition, but for its failure to understand its own subject. It stands as a prime example of how a war movie can collapse when it tries to tell a story without taking a stance, without depth, and without the emotional weight such a figure demands. It promised clarity, meaning, and insight. Instead, it became a film almost universally disliked, left, right, critics, and audiences alike. And that's why Che, 1969, earns its place on our list of the most hated war movies of all time. 6. Redacted 2007. The film that sparked outrage across the globe. Our next entry isn't just hated, it was explosive. Brian De Palma's Redacted, 2007, became one of the most controversial modern war films the moment it hit theaters. But what exactly made this small, found-footage thriller ignite such massive backlash? The story centers on a fictional group of U.S. soldiers stationed in Iraq. Shot in a raw, documentary-style format, the movie follows their daily frustrations, moral conflicts, and escalating tensions inside a war zone where every decision feels like life or death. But it was the film's disturbing portrayal of violence and misconduct that pushed audiences, especially veterans groups and military supporters, past their limit. From its very first screenings, Redacted was accused of being anti-troop, misleading, and even dangerously inflammatory. Many people believed the movie painted an unfair and extreme picture of soldiers serving overseas. Some theaters refused to show it. Others reported walkouts, protests, and heated debates in the lobby. Even online reviewers united with one message: this film crossed the line. Yet, behind all that controversy, De Palma insisted he was trying to expose the emotional toll of war and spark conversations about accountability. But instead of applause, he received widespread criticism, and the movie quickly earned its place as one of the most hated war films ever made. Whether you agree with its message or not, one thing is undeniable: Redacted hit nerves everywhere. And sometimes, a film becomes infamous not because of what it shows, but because of how it makes people feel. 5. Revolution, 1985. When Revolution hit theaters in 1985, it was supposed to be a sweeping historical epic, an American Revolution film with big stars, a massive budget, and the ambition to become the next cinematic classic. Instead, it became one of the most infamous flops in war movie history. The story follows Tom Dobb, a simple New York fur trapper played by Al Pacino, who gets unwillingly swept into the chaos of the Revolutionary War. And on paper, it sounded powerful: a father fighting to protect his son, a nation struggling for freedom, and the brutal cost of war. But what audiences saw on screen felt completely different. The film looked dark, muddy, and strangely detached. Dialogue was mumbled, battle scenes felt disorganized, and Pacino's accent became a long-running Hollywood joke. Viewers who expected a patriotic epic instead felt frustrated and confused. Many left the theater wondering how a movie with this much talent, and a budget this huge, could feel so empty. Behind the scenes, things were just as chaotic. Production was rushed, weather constantly ruined filming, and the director struggled to balance gritty realism with emotional storytelling. By the time Revolution was finished, even Pacino was unhappy with the final product. In fact, the movie's failure was so extreme that Pacino took a break from Hollywood for 4 years, a rare moment when even a legendary actor stepped away after a disappointing role. Critics were harsh. Some called it emotionally hollow. Others said it was one of the most misguided war films ever put to screen. And audiences agreed. The movie lost millions at the box office and eventually gained a reputation as one of the most hated war films of all time. But here's the twist: decades later, some cinephiles argue that Revolution deserves a second look. The raw, unfiltered battlefield shots, the grim portrayal of war, and Pacino's intense performance have earned a small cult following. Despite its failures, the movie captures a gritty version of the American Revolution rarely shown on screen. Still, for most viewers, Revolution, 1985, remains a stunning example of how a massive production can collapse under its own weight, turning high expectations into one of the most controversial war movie disasters ever made. For Pearl Harbor, 2001. A blockbuster that bombed with audiences. When Pearl Harbor hit theaters in 2001, Hollywood expected a historic epic that would honor a generation and redefine the war genre. Instead, it sparked one of the biggest cinematic backlashes of the decade. The movie had everything on paper: a massive blockbuster budget, explosive visual effects, a star-studded cast, and Michael Bay at the height of his action movie fame. But from the moment the film rolled out, audiences realized something strange: the history of Pearl Harbor wasn't the focus. A love triangle was. Viewers who wanted a gripping war drama walked into what felt more like a glossy romantic soap opera set against the backdrop of real-world tragedy. Critics didn't hold back. They slammed the film for turning a pivotal moment in American history into a Hollywood spectacle packed with slow-motion shots, dramatic stares, and more romance than strategy. Yet despite the backlash, the film did deliver one thing undeniably well: scale. The attack sequence became one of the most technically ambitious scenes ever put on screen. But that wasn't enough to save its reputation. For many, Pearl Harbor crossed a line. It looked stunning, but it felt empty. Viewers wanted emotion, accuracy, and depth, and instead got melodrama wrapped in explosions. Over time, the movie has found a strange legacy. Younger viewers discover it and appreciate the action, while longtime war movie fans still rank it as one of the most frustrating Hollywood interpretations of real events. Some call it misunderstood. Others call it unforgivable. But one thing everyone agrees on: Pearl Harbor remains one of the most hated war movies ever made, and a reminder that even the biggest budgets can't save a film from missing the emotional mark. 3. Navy SEALs, 1990. The action movie that forgot the war. If there's one movie that proves explosions alone can't save a film, it's Navy SEALs, 1990, a movie so mismatched, so gloriously chaotic, that even real Navy SEALs reportedly cringed watching it. Released at the height of late 80s/early 90s action fever, the film had everything studios thought audiences wanted. Charlie Sheen in full adrenaline junkie mode, a tough-as-nails military unit, a hostage rescue mission, fast cars, faster one-liners, and absolutely no idea what tone it was going for. From the opening 5 minutes, you can tell something's off. Instead of gritty realism or emotional stakes, the movie feels like a high-octane commercial for cool sunglasses and helicopter flyovers. Explosive scenes are stitched together with dialogue that sounds like it was written during lunch breaks. And the plot? Well, let's just say the writers seemed more interested in showcasing style than telling a coherent story. The strangest part? The film tries to glorify the SEALs while also turning them into reckless daredevils, making the elite military team look more like a group of thrill-seeking college buddies than trained professionals. Critics shredded it, audiences were confused, and military advisors distanced themselves faster than the movie's speedboats. Still, Navy SEALs has earned a weird kind of legacy. For some viewers, it's a guilty pleasure, an unintentional comedy packed with over-the-top machismo. For others, it's one of the most disappointing war films ever made, a movie that had all the ingredients for greatness but somehow burned the recipe. One thing's for sure: in the world of war cinema, Navy SEAls, 1990, remains a fascinating reminder that even high-budget action can fall flat when the story forgets the human cost of war. 2. Lions for Lambs, 2007. War movies are supposed to make us think, feel, and question the world, but sometimes they end up doing the exact opposite. One such film is Lions for Lambs, 2007, a star-studded drama that promised political insight but left audiences frustrated. Directed by Robert Redford and starring Tom Cruise, Meryl Streep, and Redford himself, Lions for Lambs was hyped as a thought-provoking exploration of the Afghanistan war, political responsibility, and personal accountability. The idea sounded powerful, intertwining stories of a senator, a journalist, and 2 soldiers on the battlefield. But in practice, it didn't land. Critics slammed it for heavy-handed dialogue, preachy monologues, and unrealistic portrayals. Instead of an intense, emotional war drama, viewers were stuck with long, philosophical speeches that felt more like lectures than storytelling. Even the high-profile cast couldn't save it from feeling cold, over-calculated, and disconnected. Audiences expected action and emotional depth, but instead they got symbolism-heavy conversations that rarely felt grounded. Some called it the most boring war movie in recent memory, while others were annoyed by its attempt to intellectualize real-life tragedy without emotional payoff. Despite the backlash, Lions for Lambs remains an interesting case study, a film with big names, bold ideas, and ambitious goals, yet one that ultimately fell flat. It's a reminder that even the most promising war dramas can fail if they prioritize rhetoric over storytelling. So, if you're a fan of war movies that spark debate, Lions for Lambs might be a must-watch, but mostly to see how a potentially great film became one of the most universally disliked war movies of the 2000s. Comment below, did you suffer through Lions for Lambs, or did you skip it entirely? Share your thoughts. 1. Battle of the Bulge, 1965. A war movie that missed the mark. When you hear the title Battle of the Bulge, you probably imagine a gripping World War II epic, explosions, daring heroics, and tense firefights. But for audiences in 1965, this movie delivered anything but that. Touted as a star-studded war epic, Battle of the Bulge boasted a cast featuring Henry Fonda, Robert Shaw, and Dana Andrews. On paper, it had everything a war movie needed to be a classic. In reality, critics and viewers alike were unimpressed. Historical inaccuracy. One of the biggest complaints was how the film twisted key events of the actual Battle of the Bulge. History buffs were outraged at glaring inaccuracies, like the unrealistic German offensive and simplified depictions of Allied strategies. Over-the-top patriotism. The movie often prioritized propaganda over storytelling, with cheesy lines and heroics that felt forced rather than earned. It became a caricature of war instead of capturing its true horrors. Pacing problems. At over 2 hours long, the film dragged in parts, leaving audiences bored during crucial moments of action. Even with impressive production values and massive battle scenes, the tension never quite landed. Despite its epic scale and A-list cast, Battle of the Bulge ended up being remembered more for what it got wrong than what it got right. Modern viewers often watch it today for kitschy nostalgia rather than cinematic mastery. Fun fact, the film was one of the first to shoot large-scale battle scenes in Europe post-World War II, paving the way for later war epics, even if it failed to impress at the time. So, would you watch it for the action, or skip it knowing it's historically questionable? Let us know in the comments below. That's a wrap on the most hated war movies of all time. From epic misfires to history gone wrong, these films prove that not every battle deserves a silver screen. Which of these movies made you shake your head the most? Let us know in the comment box below. We want to hear your thoughts. If you haven't subscribed to Globewise Entertainment yet, hit that subscribe button now and join our community for more deep dives into Hollywood's hits, misses, and hidden gems. Stay tuned, more shocking stories from the world of movies are coming your way.